Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I rise to support this, the first reading of the Financial Markets Regulators and Kiwisaver Bill, as well as the Auditor Regulation and External Reporting Bill. Sir, what we just heard was an angry speech. It was an angry speech by a former Minister of the Crown who is blaming the financial collapses in recent times on the 1990s government. Now, what we've heard in the House tonight, sir, is a bunch of opposition MPs blaming a government from 12 years ago. 12 years ago. We heard in the electricity bill, sir, we heard in the electricity bill how it was Max Bradford's reforms that were to blame for the Labor government overseeing 72% increase in the price of electricity. Apparently it's to blame, the national government of the 90s is to blame. We hear in the House constantly, the shadow leader of the House talking about blood alcohol levels from 1990 and saying that in their 9 years they didn't do anything, but suddenly they're demanding action from this government. Well, let me tell you, sir, that this financial markets reforms that this government is doing under the hard-working supervision of Simon Power has really led to these reforms. It's about regulating, and I find it interesting that under the watch of that former minister who just spoke, we had some of the biggest collapses in financial companies in the history of this country. And she gets angry, and I suggest to that member, get angry in the mirror, because it was under her watch that these companies collapsed and failed. So, sir, the reforms that we've brought into this Parliament in 2 years, Financial Service Providers and Financial Advisors Bill, passed, tick. We've got the Securities Act review coming in the new year, tick. We have the Securities Trustee and Supervisory Bill, which has been put through this House currently. And the fact is, we're having to clean up the mess of the last Labor government. So this bill, the Financial Markets Regulators and Kiwisaver Bill, establishes a new financial sector regulator. It's the Financial Markets Authority, and it makes important changes to the governance. It makes changes to the Financial Markets Authority. It makes important changes to governance of Kiwisaver schemes. We also have the second bill, which is the Auditor Regulation and External Reporting Bill, and that provides the regulation of the auditing profession and consolidates some of the accounting and auditing standards within a new body called the External Reporting Board. So National's focusing on improving the integrity of our financial system, which was torn apart by the negligence of the last Labor government. And the overriding focus is in the commerce portfolio, where we do have, I must admit, we do work together and work in a multi-partisan way to bring legislation to this House. But it's about mum and dad investors having confidence in the integrity of our financial markets. And Mr Cunliffe agrees. And he knows that our government is focused on boosting growth and creating jobs. It's also about providing financial securities for our families, and that will provide services across the board. Now, sir, it's clear that New Zealand needs a single financial market regulator with a culture of visibility, proactivity and enforcement. And that's where the last regulator actually fell down. It was the enforcement part and the lack of a culture of get tough. Now he wants to get tough, Mr Cunliffe. Under 9 years of the Labor government, you were soft. Thank you, sir. And on too many occasions, some of these finance company failures was about some of the investors' money falling through the gaps. And I don't think you'd disagree with that. And undoubtedly it damaged a lot of the confidence of these mum and dad investors. So it's really about getting confidence into the capital markets, more savings, and basic understanding of their investments in terms of the advice that they can trust and making informed choices. The FMA, as we come to call it, will have significant new powers, as the last two speakers have set out. And it will set out the objectives and functions of a new regulator, which will consolidate a lot of the regulatory functions which were in the Securities Commission, the Ministry of Economic Development, the Government Actuary and the New Zealand Stock Exchange. And under the new bill, I think one of the most important, under this first bill, one of the most important powers will be the ability of the Financial Markets Authority to publicly enforce duties of issuers, directors, auditors, trustees and other players in the markets when it's in the public interest to do so. I'll repeat that for you, sir, when it's in the public interest to do so. And this is a significant new provision because the new power was specifically requested by the FMA Establishment Board because there was a gap that it saw in the FMA's ability to oversee and enforce financial markets. What's become apparent when misconduct occurred is that individual investors could not, for various reasons, bring civil cases because of the costs and risk involved or because they had limited legal standing. And this bill will enable the FMA to have the power to exercise a person's right to bring a civil action against any market or financial markets participants where it considers that action to be in the public interest. The government will also be able to make regulations preventing products being structured to avoid being supervised by the Financial Markets Authority. And that's really important because what will happen, as nearly always happens with legislation of this type, is that the lawyers will come in, they will try and manipulate and work out ways to avoid this regulation and these types of financial regulations. So the Financial Markets Authority will also have increased powers to require that warnings about financial products and providers be included in the offer documents, also particularly important, and that the people that are involved be published in those offer documents. I won't talk about the Kiwisaver regulations, but I do want to move to the Auditor Regulation External Reporting Bill. And what this bill does is that it strengthens auditor regulation because it will require the Institute of Chartered Accountants to regulate auditors as a specialist profession rather than as just merely chartered accountants. Currently, any chartered accountant holding a certificate of public practice can carry out audits as long as they think they are competent to do so, and no audit-related restrictions have been placed on them. The bill also provides for the proposed Financial Markets Authority to be responsible for auditor oversight and monitoring and reporting on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Institute's regulatory systems. And as already been stated, a report by the Registrar of Companies identified the audit failure that was a contributing factor to the finance company collapses. No, it's true. It's true that some of the work that Labor did in this area was actually quite credible. But that shows that self-regulation alone was not working, and we do require independent oversight in this area. So the new licensing regime will only apply to major audits, such as the audits of issuers, large companies, and it will not impact the audits of small, medium-sized businesses and non-profit entities, which I think is really important, so we don't have the unintended consequences of regulation on those companies. So the bill also provides for consolidating accounting and auditing standards set within the reconstituted Accounting Standards Review Board to be called the External Reporting Board. In summary then, sir, I commend the Minister for bringing this to the House. I commend the Minister for bringing a whole raft of legislation to the House in this area of the law, and I commend it to Select Committee. Thank you.